Moon Knight has arrived on Disney Plus, and with it comes a look into the more supernatural side of the MCU, as we follow a man dealing with dissociative identity disorder, while also being possessed by an ancient Egyptian moon god. You know, basic stuff. I'm Monty from the MontyVerse, and I'm here to break down episode 1 of Moon Knight, The Goldfish Problem. The episode opens on the character of Arthur Harrow, the villain of the series, portrayed by Ethan Hawke. In the comics, Arthur Harrow was a very minor character, only appearing in one issue, and he was a scientist conducting experiments on pain theory, based off of Nazi research and experimentations. This version of the character is radically different and is more of a cult leader who serves the god Ammit in an attempt to make heaven on earth, judging people's souls from past, present, and future actions. Speaking of Ammit, we see a tattoo on Arthur's arm with 2 crocodile heads that make a scale, and also 2 crocodile heads appearing on the cane that he uses. This is a reference of the Egyptian god he serves, Ammit. Ammit, also known as the Devourer of the Dead, is sometimes but not always considered an Egyptian god that is made of the head of a crocodile, front legs of a lion, and hind legs of a hippopotamus. These are supposed to represent the 3 largest man-eating animals known to ancient Egyptians. After death, the ancient Egyptians believed Anubis, the god of death, would weigh their souls on a scale against a single feather to test their purity. All hearts deemed impure would be devoured by Ammit, denying them the peace of immortality. It appears Arthur is a devout believer because we see him ritualistically crush a glass, placing the shards in his shoes to walk on. He does this when no one is around, which lets us know that he is doing it for himself as some sort of penance. The song Every Grain of Sand plays by Bob Dylan during all of this, and the song holds a lot of meaning as it is about faith and spirituality, while also symbolizing the literal sand that Arthur is walking on. Because glass is sand, like just really hot sand. The choice of song and the introduction of the character of Arthur Harrow in this way was actually suggested by actor Ethan Hawke, who was absolutely fantastic in this episode. This leads into our updated Marvel opening logo, which is updated to feature the Eternals. We also transition songs to A Man Without Love by Engelbert Humperdinck, which is a song about a man who remembers love and is seeking out love again, but wakes up every day without it. The music in this episode is very symbolic, as we saw with the past 2 songs, with the songs when we are with Steven tending to focus on waking up, as the lyrics say here, and during the chase sequence later in the episode, when Marc is trying to take control, we hear Wake Me Up Before We Go by Wham. It's almost as if the word wake is kind of symbolic of the different personalities of the character trying to wake up. We are introduced to Stephen Grant, who in the comics is the first personality to manifest in Marc Spector, and who is also a wealthy businessman and actor. If you want to learn more about Stephen Grant and Moon Knight in general from the comics, check out my History of Moon Knight video linked below. This version of Stephen is more of a timid, spastic type, and I think they did this to avoid comparisons with Bruce Wayne, because a lot of people used to compare Moon Knight and Batman in the comics. We see Stephen's morning routine as he unshackles his leg. He thinks he is suffering from sleepwalking, so he has sand around his bed and tape on his door to monitor his movements, not realizing that he actually has dissociative identity disorder, and the other personality can easily replace or restore all of these things. Next to his bed, we see a completed Rubik's Cube, but later on we see in the episode that Steven is tinkering with it and having trouble solving it, so maybe the implication here is the Marc Spector persona is the one solving the puzzle. The sand around his bed is interesting because it forms the symbol of a crescent moon, aka the symbol of the Moon Knight. The first steps he takes every morning is on the sand, showing his connection to Egypt as well as mirroring the steps of Arthur Harrow, because both characters step on sand in one form or another. It's almost like they're a reflection of each other. We see Steven feed his goldfish Gus, who only has one fin, like Nemo, who is referenced later in the episode. Goldfish were also synonymous with having poor memories, which is symbolic of what is happening with Steven in this episode. Steven is seen talking to his mom's voicemail on the phone as he hangs a postcard that is supposedly from her. I have a feeling this is all actually Marc, as we see postcards at the museum later in the episode that he could easily be sending, and the voicemails are a good way for him to learn details about Steven's life to help maintain the cover while he has control of the body. On the way to work, Steven is seen sleeping on a bus, letting us know that maybe he's not getting enough sleep due to the other personality taking over and being active during his nights. Steven passes through a puddle on his way to work, the first of many reflections in this episode. Reflections are very symbolic throughout the show as they represent the multiple personalities inside of our main character. Inside the museum, Steven talks to a little girl about ancient Egypt, so that we see that he is very knowledgeable about it and has connection to the pyramids. There's some foreshadowing when discussing souls being judged at death, with them being weighed to determine if they have been good or not. He also talks about the field of reeds carrying a soul into the afterlife. This weird little girl asks him if it sucked being rejected from the field of reeds, and this is a nod to the fact that Khonshu brought Marc Spector back from the dead in the comics to serve him, and that is maybe what has happened here as well. Stevie Boy is approached by one of the tour guides and finds out that he has a date that he doesn't remember because it's either the Marc Spector or Jake Lockley persona that asked her out. We know that this is not Steven because Steven is a vegan and the date was for the best steak in town. When Steven is in the back, he helps his boss Donna with some inventory, and we see him carry a crate of Tarawet plushies. Tarawet is the ancient Egyptian goddess of childbirth and fertility, and is depicted as a hippopotamus. We also see him carrying a crate with a lion and crocodile plushies, which are the 3 animal components of Amet. It is here that Steven also brings up the Ennead, a group of 9 deities in Egyptian mythology worshipped at the Heliopolis. In Marvel Comics, the Ennead are the gods of Egypt that hail from the celestial Heliopolis, a small pocket dimension adjacent to Earth similar to Taelo in Shang-Chi. The comic Ennead have interacted with the Asgardians and Celestials and have ties to Wakanda because they include Bast, the panther god who is the patron deity of the nation. After work, Steven is seen talking to a street performer, a human statue who we see identified in the credits as Crawley. In the comics, Bertrand Crawley was a homeless man working as an informant for Moon Knight. He often would carry himself as a British aristocrat rather than a man living on the streets of New York. This is a great way to adapt the character because as a street performer, I'm sure this Crawley hears and sees a lot throughout the day. Here we are treated to another reflection, this time a great one in a puddle that appears to be right side up, but a falling leaf indicates that it is actually upside down, and it is a double reflection as we pan to Steven getting up to walk away. I think that the use of 3 reflections is a clever way the show is hinting at the eventual arrival of Marc's second personality, Jake Lockley. There are multiple times in this episode where we see the character divided into 3 reflections, which symbolizes the other parts of himself. Even in the end credits, Oscar Isaac's name has a picture of his face divided into 3, further adding to the theory that there is a third personality inside that mind. What if Jake Lockley and not Marc Spector was the one to ask that woman out on a date? And what if he makes a full appearance later on in the series, or is teased for possibly next season? Back at the apartment, we follow Steven in his nightly routines, which include reading about ancient Egyptian history, fumbling with a Rubik's Cube, and listening to a podcast, which we hear repeated. This is essentially an audio reflection, an echo, to further establish the theme of reflections this episode. He wakes up and finds himself with a dislocated jaw outside of a mansion in the German Alps, with a golden scarab in his possession. It appears he jumped or was thrown from one of the windows. Steven begins to hear a voice in his head, and yes, this is legendary actor F. Murray Abraham as the voice of Khonshu, the ancient Egyptian god of the moon and the god of vengeance. In the comics, Khonshu chooses Marc Spector to be his champion, the Moon Knight, who seeks vengeance in his name as the Fist of Khonshu. He's determined to carry out his mission and is sometimes at odds with Spector at points in their relationship. Khonshu tells Steven to go back to sleep, worm. You are not supposed to be here, as if to say that Marc is the main personality and Steven was the one who wormed his way into his head. Steven is then chased by armed men into the city and he pulls up his hood to blend into the crowd. His hoodie is white, so the white hood invokes the image of Moon Knight. It is here he sees Arthur Harrow parting the crowd, everyone touching him as he walks by, like he is some type of spiritual leader. Ethan Hawke has stated that he based his portrayal of the character on cult leaders like David Koresh, and he invokes the same type of vibe here. Steven watches as Harrow judges souls with his tattoo rhythmically moving with his cane. His tattoo glows green for a good soul and red for a bad one. It is interesting that the young man with a lot of life left to live would be deemed good, while the old woman who claims to have lived a good life is judged bad. Is it possible that Amet is using Harrow to recruit an army of able-bodied servants and weeding out the weaker people while still being able to gain strength by eating their souls? Harrow wants the scarab, and Oscar Isaac does some fantastic body acting as he is totally able to divorce his facial expressions from his body movements. Arthur sends his goons after Steven to recover the artifact, and Steven blacks out, waking up covered in blood surrounded by defeated henchmen. This is a really cool way for them to get away with the brutality of the character while having it take place in the MCU proper. I do hope we end up seeing some more action as the series progresses though. Steven escapes in a sweet cupcake van and a car chase occurs as more blackouts happen when Marc fights for control of the body. After one final blackout, he arrives back home thinking it was all a dream. He goes about his morning until he notices that Gus now has 2 fins. He goes to the pet store, and the employee said he came in yesterday asking the same questions, and this confuses Steven, who leaves to get ready for his date. But unfortunately, she never shows, and when he calls her, she said that their date was on Friday, and that today is Sunday, meaning that Steven lost 3 days. A cool detail to note is that Steven's phone has hieroglyphics on its case. But I have to condemn Steven here for making a huge steak violation because he ordered a filet cooked well done, and that is simply unforgivable, no matter how emotionally vulnerable he is. When he is back home, Steven references the Queen of Sheba, who is a Jewish biblical figure, which may be a nod to Marc Spector's Jewish heritage in the comics. In his apartment, Steven finds a secret compartment holding a phone and a key. After charging the phone, Steven sees that there are a bunch of missed calls from a Layla, who may be the MCU's version of Marlene Al-Ruan, who was a member of Marc's Moon Knight team and one of his love interests. Also in the phone is a call from a Duchamp, which is short for Jean-Paul Duchamp, aka Frenchie, Marc's most trusted ally, who he met during his mercenary days and is also a member of his Moon Knight team. Layla calls again and Steven answers. She calls him Marc, and she says that she's been trying to find him for months and thought he was dead. Hearing the name Marc almost summons him as Steven comes to start hearing that voice in his head, warning him to not look as he appears to Steven in a mirror. Spooked, Steven runs and enters the elevator, frantically hitting the ground floor button. The elevator stops on the 3rd floor and Khonshu appears, and he looks amazing, a perfect recreation of his comic appearance. He stomps towards Steven, but when he reaches the door, Steven looks up to see an old woman standing there, and the elevator is now back on the 5th floor. But Steven never went down, so how is it back up? The sequence continues to aid the uneasiness and tension of the series as Steven starts to potentially become an unreliable narrator. Khonshu then appears and Steven blacks out, waking up the next day inside of a bus, meaning Marc had control up until then. He sees Khonshu watching from the street as he frantically exits the bus, seeing that Arthur Harrow was there as well, tracking him down. Harrow appears to Steven in the museum, showing that he has minions all over, including ones that work at the place. What is interesting is that all of his minions have the same scale tattoo as him, but on their wrists, and they are upside down compared to his. Are all of these minions ones that were already judged and wear that tattoo to show it? Harrow tells Steven about Amit. He explains that if Amit was around, she could have prevented some of the worst tragedies in human history by prejudging souls in a Minority Report type of way. However, she was trapped by her fellow gods and betrayed by her avatar, leading to a double avatar joke. He wastes Steven's soul but is unable to come out with a verdict due to all of the personalities in his mind. Steven escapes and Harrow lets him leave, choosing instead to send his jackals after him later that night. As Steven walks past a glass case, the double reflections of Marc and potentially Jake notice the jackal approaching. What follows is a horror-style chase scene as Steven attempts to run from the jackal, who we see moving in the shadows with glowing eyes. Steven hides in a bathroom surrounded by mirrors as the reflection of Marc calms him down and asks him for control to save them both. Steven gives in and hands Marc control as he begins the transformation. We see hieroglyphs appear on the wall as the suit is summoned, and a cool detail that I love is that as the suit manifests on Marc, we do not see it appear to manifest in the reflections in the mirror because that is not him, those are the other personalities. Moon Knight appears and takes down the jackal as the episode ends with our money shot of the hero. Another cool detail being the mirror behind Moon Knight is completely destroyed as if to signify Marc or the Moon Knight breaking free. This episode was absolutely fantastic, and there is so much to speculate about moving forward. What do you guys think of Moon Knight? Comment down below and give me your thoughts. And if you liked the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And for everyone new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date on all of our latest content. Until next time, guys, catch you later.